Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first session for Wellness Week. I'm very excited to have you all here. I'm just getting a few things set up to make sure everything's running smoothly. Alrighty, let's get started. So I just want to go over a couple housekeeping things first, and then we will get started with the very exciting session we have today. So first of all, we are doing Zoom webinar. So as you can see, you've just seen my face, you're not seeing everyone's faces. So if you want to interact with everyone, there is a chat feature at the bottom. If you click chat, you can change it from all panelists and set it to all panelists and attendees, and then everyone will be able to see your messages. I see there's some good mornings coming in, so good morning to you all. The next way you can interact with us is through the Q&A feature at the bottom. You can send your questions and that'll come directly to me and our presenter today, which is Karen from CMHA Calgary, who I'll introduce in just a moment. There are also closed captions available. If you want to show or hide these, you can click at the bottom. There's a button that says live transcript. If you click that, you can either choose to show or hide the closed captionings that are happening. So whatever you prefer. And at the end of this session, you'll see on your screen a button to click a survey. If you could fill that out, we really appreciate any feedback that you have. And we really appreciate that. Now, to any Horizon residents that are attending this session, by completing the survey, you will enter in to win a prize just for attending this session. The prize today is a Stress Less case. It's got lots of fun goodies for a night of self-care. We've got, some teas, some bath items. So make sure that you complete that survey at the end. That's how you'll enter to win into the draw. So I will also send a link in the chat as well that you can copy and paste directly into a browser if you're worried about the button showing up. All right, so that is all my housekeeping items. So welcome to Wellness Week. Horizon Wellness Week is such a fun initiative, and I'm really excited to be kicking it off, 11 a.m. Monday morning. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Horizon Housing is an affordable housing provider here in Calgary. We serve just over 1,200 residents from all walks of life. And, this past year has definitely been tough for all of us. We've faced new challenges in terms of how we live our daily lives, but also to our wellness and how we take care of ourselves. And that's really changed over the past year. So we at Horizon really wanted to find a way to bring wellness directly into the homes of Horizon residents, Calgarians, and even people beyond that. And so, we thought, as a housing provider, how are we going to make this happen? And Horizon's unique. We actually have a partnership model where we work with over 40 different agencies here in Calgary that provide a range of supports and services. And so we thought, why not bring that expertise together and really create a week of wellness? Wellness extends far beyond physical wellness, mental health, there's financial wellness, there's a really broad spectrum. And so we wanted to make sure we were bringing all elements of wellness together, to keep us going, get our spirits up, and continue our journey of wellness. So that's what Wellness Week is all about. So make sure you check out all the other sessions you can attend. Now, let's get things started with our very first session. We have Karen Gallagher-Burt from Canadian Mental Health Association, Calgary region, and she is the Director of Philanthropy and Stewardship over there. And she's just a really great person. She has a long history in social work and the nonprofit sector, and really has a passion for mental health. She's such a joy to work with and to listen to. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to her so that you can really hear the amazing things she has to say about resilience, connection, and belonging.
All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. You'll notice my screen behind me is a lovely visual of Hawaii with things moving. This is part of my mental wellness, is to be able to take a look at places that I love that I haven't been to for a long time, unlike some folks that travel to Hawaii at Christmas. I did not. I followed the rules. But honestly, for me, thinking of the beach and thinking of places that are warm and sunny are ways that I inspire myself and help me get up in the morning. I think all of us, as Moira said, are struggling with things. And I think that the critical part of that is that how to practice what you can and what kind of things you can do to take care of yourself, knowing that we're pretty much at home, we're pretty much isolated. And lots of us, that's how we get our energy and how we move forward in life is sort of to connect with people outside of that. And we're not able to do that right now. And for me, that has been probably the most difficult thing about COVID is that inability to connect with people and be part of things that that just can't happen right now. So I want to talk a little bit today about self-care, self-compassion, and I really want to talk about a few strategies. There's no homework. This is not a session where I intend for you to, be able to do something at the end. There's no tests. Honestly, for me, this is about us having a chat and really talking about what kinds of things work for us and what kinds of things just aren't working. And I think that for me is one of the critical things is what works and what doesn't. So really, we're going to focus a bit on resilience, connection, and belonging. And when you put those three things together, you're also going to talk about hope, because I think that's what's keeping us all going is that little bit of hope. I keep saying that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's not a train, but the reality for me is the end of the tunnel keeps moving. And I think that's what we're all experiencing, that it keeps moving and we can't figure out how to stay hopeful and stay resilient when the end goal keeps moving out of your way. It's kind of like dangling a carrot in front of a horse on a stick, and they'll never reach it, but they'll keep moving towards it. And that's where I think we all are today. So I want to thank Moira and Horizon Housing for inviting me to do this. I honestly, as a director, this is really not a part of my job, but it's my passion, is to talk about mental wellness and to help inspire people, hopefully, to practice some good things in order to support your mental wellness. I will fully disclose that during this pandemic, I have struggled with my mental health very much. I have always been very resilient. I have great coping strategies. I think that I have a therapist or counselor that I see fairly regularly, but during the pandemic, it wasn't enough. So in the fall of last year, sort of the end of summer, I actually have joined the crew that has medication to support my mental health and well-being. And I think that that's something many of us are experiencing right now. If you've experienced it before, I bet you might have upped your meds and things like that. But for me, I've never used medication, but I didn't have capacity to do anything else. So as Moira mentioned about Horizon Housing, the partnership model includes those 40 agencies, and CMHA is very proud to be one of those agencies they partner with. If you don't know about CMHA Calgary, really, we work hard to promote mentally healthy people. And we work very hard to do what's called community-based mental health. And really what that means is we're not AHS. We're not hospital setting, we're not medical settings. So folks that we work with or who come to us for combination of socialization, for our courses, for our therapy, for our groups, people who come to us, we never ask what your diagnosis is. We're not really wanting to go there. We don't want to go with a label. What we ask is where you are in your recovery journey. And recovery we use for mental health and substance use, because we know that it is a journey and we know that there is hope for recovery at the end, even if recovery is a modified life based upon your illness, if that's what you have. So we work hard to be that leader, and we really try and be proactive versus reactive. Most of the folks we work with are mild to moderate on the mental health side of things, I would say. But the 5 houses that we support with through Horizon Housing, we have a couple of houses there that are what we call post-discharge. So folks that are coming out of hospital that perhaps don't have the capacity to be on their own yet, or they don't have a place to go, they come to our housing program where they're fully supported, and those houses are owned by Horizon. So it's a really great way to do what we do best, which is support people with mental health, and Horizon does what they do best, which is do affordable housing with a fabulous model. And that's really critical for us to know what our niche is and to know what our niche isn't. And I think that's super important to know what you are and what you're not. So why are we talking about mental health? Well, if you haven't paid attention to the news, I praise you. I think that we were getting a little better about talking about mental health pre-pandemic, but right now, as the pandemic keeps extending, as I said, the goalpost keeps moving. I think that those of us who struggle already have found some difficulty, but more interesting to me right now is that those who've never struggled before, have never identified as struggling, are now struggling. And it may not be to the point where they would think, well, I need a doctor or I need to be diagnosed, but they may be at a spot where they just don't have capacity to move forward. And I think of all the folks who are privileged enough to work at home, who are trying to figure out what that looks like, if they have small humans and pets and partners and that. But on the opposite side, those who are alone, those who don't have anyone with you, those who are experiencing that, not only that loneliness, but complete isolation. It's very, very difficult. And when we talk about mental health for us, it's really about mental wellness. As Moira mentioned, she talked a bit about your mental health, your physical health. There's financial health, there's environmental, spiritual. There's multiple areas to look at. Are you healthy or not? And so we try very hard to look at it from a wellness perspective. When I present this to corporations, it's always fascinating to me because corporations, I actually have to make a financial what's the return on investment for investing in mental health? And I struggle with that because for me, what's the return if you don't invest in mental health? And we are way behind on where we should be as a Western nation in supporting our community with mental health needs. And we know that across the country that Canada does not fund this well, and it's something we're always working for. We want to clarify about mental health versus mental illness because when you talk about the fact that you might have a mental illness, you're wondering, I want to take it outside of an illness and say it's not about feeling down or upset over something for a few days. That really is just an event and something going on. When we talk about mental illness, it comes down more to the duration, the intensity, and honestly, the changing in thinking, mood, and behavior that can define that. And that's why we say recovery, because many of those things we can learn better, learn different, and do better when we move forward. But for lots of folks, it's not going to happen. It is going to be that long haul journey. And I think of the COVID long haulers, and I think with mental health, there's some that are long haulers, that this is a lifetime that they're going to be coping, managing, struggling with their mental health concerns. So instead of putting a return on investment from a dollar perspective, I put a return on investment in a health perspective and a society perspective, because caring for our mental health should be front and center and an easy thing to talk about versus something that is constantly stigmatized. And that's really critical as we talk about that. I want to give you a little bit of context where we are, a combination of in the pandemic, but what we're calling the echo pandemic. And that's the secondary pandemic that's going to happen. We'll take the disease moderately out of it because we know we're going to deal with this for a long time. And we'll talk just mental health. So we say that, and this is not my research, this is research from the US with disaster response. And when they talk about disaster response, they give these 6 stages that you go through when you're responding to a disaster. So if you think back, if any of you were here in 2013 when the flood hit, we had a very short first events. The fear and uncertainty didn't hit until 11 o'clock that morning when things started to hit in Calgary. There was that massive impact. We saw the heroes afterwards, all the people that showed up to clean and help. Then we had a bit of a honeymoon while we sorted things out, and people were so supportive and kind. And then we went into a little bit of a disillusionment phase, and that was is this ever going to end? What else is going on? And then you move into recovery. So when I want you to think about that model, I wanted to put it in a chart and show you that from the perspective of the mental health side of what we're experiencing. So same 6 points all across this chart. And notice on the side on the left, the emotional highs and emotional lows. And you'll see that line kind of like a heartbeat going up and down depending on where we're at. So for us, that pre-disaster would have been like January, February last year, where we started to see things in other countries. There was a little bit happening in Asia. There was some things happening in England. And then we started to see it in the Northeast US or Northwest US. So it's in Seattle and those areas. And then it would have been March when it really hit Canada and started to amp up. I know my last day in the office was March 13th, which was a Friday. I thought it was rather ominous, a Friday the 13th, and I haven't been back to the office full time since. Reality is that it's not safe for us to be gathering when we'd love to, but we're staying home. So that pre-disaster, January, February. Impact was mid-March, and that's when it really went full blown. And we were pretty much on lockdown and then trying to figure out things, how we can support each other, ourselves particularly, hopefully, but a lot of it was supporting family and friends. Then the hero stage kicked in. So for the pandemic last year, that would have been end of April, May, June. And what I saw then as someone working in this sector was the kindness of people. I saw companies reaching out to support us. I remember dentists who closed their offices offering their gloves and their masks for us to use in our group homes, because we also have to keep those folks COVID free and follow some really strict protocols. So that heroic stage was where everybody was trying to help each other. And we saw that happening quite distinctly. We kind of hit the end of June or mid-June, and we went into what I call the honeymoon. And it really was. So June, July, August, we were outside as much as we could. We were able to gather outside in small groups, able to see each other. We were able to exercise outside, do all those things. So we start to feel a bit better and kind of like, oh, we got this. We got this. And then disillusionment started in September, I think. And in September, a couple of things happened. But most importantly, it was when our smaller humans and our universities folks all went back to school. And when they went back to school, I think as a society, we kind of took a deep breath and went, okay, let's see what's going to go on here. And then we started to see pockets go up and down. And that disillusionment was really a fear-based, when is this going to ever end? I'm afraid of what's going on. And unfortunately, we're still in disillusionment. In a general disaster, that disillusionment stage can be much shorter, but I think we're going to be in disillusionment for a little bit longer, probably till the end of summer, with some lightening. I know today is 2 weeks since I got my first vaccine, so I have that little bit of extra comfort, but I'm not comfortable going around people who are more vulnerable. And I have young adults in my life that can't be vaccinated, and I'm worried about them. I don't want to make sure they have anything. So it's something I'm really, really focused on. But there is an end to disillusionment. And then we move forward into a reconstruction phase. It was physical, but I would also say here, it's a renewal and a regeneration. You'll notice I use a lot of words that start with RE, but that renewal of what our life looks like, and maybe a bit of a reevaluation of what working is, what's not working. The hard part is that the really dark side and the hard work that comes with mental health for folks that are struggling since the pandemic, that hasn't hit yet. And that may sound awful, but we really haven't seen the true amount of folks that are going to struggle. And that's going to probably happen usually as a year to 18 months after the disasters ended. So we think of all of us who've been isolated, the mental health struggles we have. I think of all of the healthcare workers, the frontline workers, the grocery store workers, those people who are experiencing trauma in lots of ways, particularly our healthcare professionals. And many of them are being diagnosed already with PTSD, and they're still pushing through. They're amazing people, but they're exhausted. And so those folks, particularly all of those frontline folks, are really going to struggle going forward. So I wanted to give you that snapshot, but it's not all doom and gloom. It's honestly, it's a little bit better than what that sort of looks at. But I want to remind you that like last year, we were kind of fueled a bit by adrenaline in the summer. We had that ability to connect and we had some energy to do that. And it was a bit of a false dawn about the end coming over the summer. And when that second wave came in, it was that dark one where we were trying to pull on our personal resiliency, which made it really hard. Think about all the times when you've been amped up, the chemicals in your brain, when your adrenaline kicks in. It's not the happy chemicals, it's the fear chemicals. And we've all been in that state of fear and stress and anxiety. And we're probably feeling somewhat depleted of those particular hormones and neuron, I can't remember the word, the connectors in our brain. We're feeling a little bit depleted on that side. And that's the hard part right now, is moving forward through that. So we found that this last year in mental health, when folks have reached out for us for help, and even when I do these sessions for corporations, things like that, what I have found is that the common theme for every single person in 2020 was grief and loss. And grief and loss is universal. and we all manage it in different ways, but we are all grieving. If in the worst case scenario, you might be grieving someone you lost to COVID. And for that, I have so much empathy and so much compassion. But also, we have lost our ability to mourn. We have lost our ability to live things that were so valuable for us. I know for me, it's a lot about connecting with other humans, which is gone. And I feel a massive loss for that in my life. And I honestly feel more fearful about going back to the office because it's a tough place to be. So grief and loss has been something that everyone's dealing with it, whether it be a job loss or an income loss of any sort, a human being, the lifestyle that you had, or things that you were planning on doing. I don't know how many weddings have been canceled, how many christenings, how many funerals, how many celebrations that we want to have that we have lost in the last year. The good part is that hopefully we won't go through a third year, because we are in a second year now where some people are having their second COVID birthday. We had our second COVID Easter. You know, we're experiencing those things for the second time, and we all thought it would be over by now. So reminding ourselves that collectively as a society, we're all experiencing grief and loss can sometimes be helpful, because we realize that we're not alone. We may feel alone, we may feel isolated, but society as a whole is feeling the same things that you are in that grief and loss, and particularly, as I say, with isolation. So this is what I'm seeing for 2021 and moving forward. As I said, I love my R words. So I see this overarching theme of resiliency. While people are still struggling, and that's going to be a reality, there is a resiliency that we have that is allowing us to move forward and sort of keep our head above water. We're treading water, but we're afloat and we're staying there, and it's okay. I mentioned that at the end of this pandemic, there's going to be a recovery stage and a revisiting of what life looked like. And that recovery stage will be that one where we have more folks that are identifying they might be struggling with some mental health concerns, people that have never struggled before. And then we're also going to see some challenging times in society as we look at our job format, what's going on there for careers for people, for jobs, even part-time jobs. If you had a part-time job in a store or something like that, probably, unless it was a vital service, you haven't been able to do that and you've lost an income. So there's many places. But my favorite part, this is my favorite part, absolutely, is that this is our chance to reevaluate and refocus on what really, really matters, what really matters to us. The picture that Moira put up in the beginning was a great headshot that I had taken a couple of years ago as a speaker. And when Moira put it up this morning, I started to laugh. And I said, you know, I can't remember the last time I really dressed up or I did my makeup or those kinds of things, because sitting at home, and someone was commenting in the chat earlier about, oh, we didn't have to wear pants. Well, you're talking to someone who regularly is wearing leggings with a nice shirt on top. Today, I did manage to put a dress on, but if you can see my slippers that are on my feet, they're giant fuzzy ones to keep my toes warm. So there's been this comfort zone of relaxing a little bit and doing things a bit differently that I'm loving. That is one of my good takeaways from the pandemic, is that I can live my life a little differently, a little less stressful, a lot more a reduced intensity, and spend a bit more time with my family and doing other things that honestly have given me a lot of pleasure, joy, and comfort during the pandemic. So we're really kind of in this really neat phase right now to be able to think about what matters the most to us. And I love the term value-driven decision-making. And if any of you have ever done any therapy or any supports with even our recovery colleges courses at CMHA, you notice we talk a lot about your values and where you feel you are and what you want to do, what you need to do. And we're not very good as a Western society, and I would say particularly as Canadians, we're terrible at taking care of ourselves. We're so polite, we're so kind, we talk to everyone else, we worry about everyone else. And then inside our head, we're often thinking, how come nobody asks about me? How come nobody ever says, you know, how are you doing? Or why am I always the first one to text or call? Why don't you call me? And that empty feeling is really, really difficult for us to deal with. So while you're going through this, this is your chance to do those kind of evaluation of what your life looks like and what works for you and maybe what doesn't. And some of the things that have gone, we don't take back. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. So Going from there, I do want to talk a little bit about resilience. And when I first heard the term resilience, I think I was grade 5, 6, something like that. And it was science. And we were talking about elastics and elasticity and how it could stretch and come back. And I remember it made sense to me in terms of scientifically that, you know what, you can push something beyond and then it will come back. I also think of overeating sometimes when I eat way too much and my stomach hurts, but it eventually goes back. And resiliency is that ability to spring back or go back and look at things in a different way. It really is about being able to recover or move through the difficulties. And I think some people would describe it as truly that toughness. I don't like the word toughness. I actually like the idea that it's that stretchable, that ability to move in and out, that ability to adjust. And it doesn't mean it's easy. It's up and down for sure, but it really is that ability to move in and out of the stress as it comes to us. And I loved this quote by Amit Sood, who said, "The core strength you use to lift the load of life." That's what resiliency is. That's that inner strength. I tried to compare that to exercise. I'm not a good exerciser. But I always thought of when a trainer had said to me about your core muscles, your ab muscles, and that I would do some activity and I'm always a bit floppy and I'm a bit klutzy. And the one thing she came back to all the time was it's your core strength. You have to maintain that core ability to sort of control all the other muscles in your body because everything comes out of a strong center. And I think that really works well for resilience. I think resiliency is that core strength that we have, and it enables us to get through things, whether it's to lift it or move through it. It enables us to move forward and not get caught in the waves of hopelessness. And so I love that. I love that quote, and hopefully the analogy works for you. I mentioned I'm not a big exerciser, but I am a big walker, and I walk every day. And often this is the things I'm contemplating: is that what are the things on my mind right now? What do I need to lift and move through? And what can I let go? What can I just say, I'm not going to focus on that today? I need to move through that. So that's kind of what I look at resilience. What I also see with resilience is on the psychological or mental side, this is very much a medical-based quote from the DSM, actually, from the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. But I think it's important to sort of see it from strictly that mental health side of things, that when you have psychological resilience, then you're able to mentally or emotionally cope with the crisis or return to a pre-crisis state. And I'm going to go back to that comment about the length of the pandemic, and that we haven't really had a chance to return to that pre-crisis state. We're constantly with that adrenaline pumping through our body and that fear-based things. And it's really challenging to find that inner strength. I think when you use and as it says here, mental processes and behaviors, it comes down to me as a social worker to strength-based approach, to be able to say, I am good, I am capable, I am able to move through this, and to be able to have some of that dialogue with yourself and be able to protect yourself somewhat from the negative effects of those stressors. It really is important to have that bounce back elasticity, but particularly in the mental health side. So there's no simple answer to this, and I would not disrespect you enough to say, I'm going to give you 5 keys, 5 tools, 5 something that will help you feel better, because quite frankly, that would be bull blank. I normally swear I'll try and be good. But really, it would be absolutely inappropriate for me to tell you, here's what works, because I don't know. I know some things that work for me. I know some things that I have been told are good examples for folks to consider, ways to move through things. But not everything works. It's just the reality that not everything is going to work for everyone. But my big things are oftentimes about reframing how I think. And that's trying to find the language, not to turn something into a positive, but to find something in it that's a takeaway, whether it's something I'm learning, whether it's something that I've got a new strategy around, or I tried something else in my brain. And so it's that ability to shape things in my brain a little bit so that the language I'm using internally, how I talk to myself, and yes, I talk to myself, sometimes out loud, which is very confusing for my partner. But when I talk to myself, how am I able to take those negative thoughts and put a different spin on? Again, not positive, but what can I take away from that? The other part about it is focusing on what you can control and you can control alone. And I love this picture of that cat staring intently. You'll notice all cats and dogs. I'm a bit of a freak for animals. But that intensity of focus. And the pandemic has taught us one thing about the media, that they're really, really not very good to us. They're not good for our brain. And I don't care what media it is, whether it's social media on your phone, on your computer, or watching the news, that the information coming in, we have to control that and manage that for our own mental wellness and create some strategies around that. And that's just one example, only one example of things that you can control. And you can kind of get off that circle of adrenaline rush. You can sort of pull yourself away by stopping or limiting some of these things. And I do want to talk a bit about social media, particularly as we sort of go through some strategies here. So one of the things that I found is super helpful, and this is also part of what CMHA Calgary does with our peer support program. So if you're not familiar with our peer support program, we basically have found a wonderful model, we didn't create it, that includes people with lived experience with mental health or substance use, either themselves personally or someone in their family or very tight inner circle, their intimate circle, where they've been a support person for that. So those people that have that lived experience, either personally or family, they have an expertise. You have an expertise, if some of you are in this room, that I don't have as a social worker. You know ways to get through the system, you know ways to find supports, and you have such value to add to other people's moving on their journey through things. And so when we design our peer courses, so if you came to Recovery College and did a class with us, and they're all free, if you did one of those classes, there will always be 2 facilitators. And one facilitator has an educational background. They know how to design curriculum. And they know how to do adult learning. And the peer person also has some training in that, usually a lot less, but some are actually very highly qualified. But they've got that lived experience. And every course we do is co-designed and co-facilitated by a peer. And we find, and I've seen some research that shows that the number one thing that people struggle with is not having someone understand them and not know what they're going through. And I've heard that a lot for medical practitioners. A recent study just showed, and I'm not a big one for stats, but I thought this one was quite fascinating, that there was a study done by the Alberta Medical Association, so the doctors. And it basically said there's about 40% of doctors that don't want to have patients with mental illness. They just want to focus on the physical. And I thought, wow, that's not holistic at all. And you serve the whole person. I come to you with not just my body, but all the other things that are part of me. And that's really critical to make sure that your doctor or your friends are supporting you with, is all of those areas. So our peer program really is about that connection and that ability to share appropriately, really good boundaries for our peers, but also to be able to help someone sort of figure out that they're not alone and it's okay. And some of the keys in our peer program, and these are things I've learned for many years when I worked at the distress center. These were things I learned to practice on the crisis lines when I was supporting individuals who were struggling. And the big thing is about being someone who pays attention and listens and observes. So I obviously am a good talker. I can be a good listener, but I have to be a good listener purposefully. When I'm in a natural conversation, if someone told me who spoke the most, it will always be me. And it's probably like 70-30. I'm a talker. I like to tell stories, all those things. Just ask my partner, he'll tell you. But the reality is that I do know when to keep quiet. And I actually have some tricks for that one. When I'm talking or listening to someone, frequently I will actually put my hand over my mouth like this and stick my finger up or put my hand right over my mouth while I'm listening, because it's my visual signal to shut up. And take time to listen and learn. So paying attention to folks. And I think that when I'm talking about this, I don't want you to immediately think about how you're going to do that for other people. I also want you to think about, how am I going to ask for this from other people, and what parts can I practice on my own? So that paying attention, that observation is really critical. Active listening. And active listening is very much different than just listening to someone's words. We are sort of trained and socialized when someone's talking, What we're doing at the same time is we're formulating our answer in our head. And so we're not listening. We're so busy trying to figure out what we're going to say, whether it's a critique or an argument or just a response. We're so busy creating that in our head, we're not listening. And that's one of the things I challenge everyone in my life on, is like, put your phone down, look at me and give me the time and pay attention to what I'm doing, pay attention to what I'm saying, pay attention to my body language. All those kinds of things are really important when you're doing active listening. Ear and mouth proportionate, that comes from my mom. My mom always said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. Didn't work for me. But in a clinical setting, it did work for me when I was working in clinical. And that really good understanding of, I should be listening twice as much as I talk. In my personal life, again, that won't happen. My personality is too big and strong. But in my work life, that's really critical, whether I'm working with funders, whether I'm working with coworkers, is to really to be a good listener. There's some practices in many of the Indigenous communities around Alberta and Treaty 7 about how you conduct yourself when you go into a new environment where there are other people that are respected or part of that. And I remember going on a committee, and the elder that was helping me said, you need to just be quiet and listen. You're not here right now to offer anything. You need to listen and learn. And there was 4 meetings before I even offered something up. And in that 4th meeting, I consulted with the elder before I did. And that was one of the most magical environments that I had, because the thoughts that I had for those 4 meetings and the ideas I wrote down, many of them became clearer as we went through, and I was able to filter them through. So I wasn't talking endlessly and of things that they already had done. I took the time to listen and learn. And that's really about that active listening and that ear and mouth proportionate. The other part of this is you don't give advice. And I mentioned I have a background with clinical studies. I've done lots of interesting work. I have been a clinician, and I don't like it. I'm not very good at it, quite frankly. Oh, let's reframe that. I am good at it. It's not good for me. I'm not good when I go home from that. But what I think I took away from all of that learning was that ability to really hear what people are saying. And I learned a new thing: don't give advice. And that's a really tough one when you are, I would call myself an elder in my community, someone pushing 60. I am very much in that end of things where I think I have some good life experiences and some academic experiences and work experiences. But really, people don't ask you for help where they want you to give them advice. They want you to do those other things: listen, make sure that you're observing what's going on, asking questions, making, as I put here, suggestions, observations, considerations. And I always use the magic of 3. When I'm talking and listening to someone and they're talking about what a tough time they have, I listen for their comments, and I particularly listen for feeling words. And if I hear someone say, I'm feeling depressed, then I might ask them a little bit more about that. And I'd say, well, tell me how that feels. And then I might say, well, is it all the time, every day? Is it just right now? Did something happen? And so asking the questions for them to work through it. And then I might do an observation. You know what? I have observed lately, or I've noticed lately that, and it might be something that they're doing differently. And being in this Zoom environment is much more difficult to assess. But one of the things I observe is when people, and we joke about not wearing pants or wearing shorts, but when people start to become disheveled, or when people, I'm noticing they're drinking 2-3 coffees in one meeting, although that could be me. When I start to see those things, I make observations that I notice that, and then I ask them how they're doing today. And that's the magic of how are you doing, is please don't ask people, how are you doing? Because quite frankly, we're all shitty. Oh, I swore, I knew I would. We're all shitty right now in some level, shape, or form. And so when you say, how are you? We go back into that language of I'm fine and how are you? Which is absolutely bull. That's not the reality for anyone in our world. So one of the things I have learned is that I'm not going to ask you how you are. I'm going to say, how are you doing today? And that one word addition in that changes the focus to the person in the moment and how they're feeling and how they're going today, because I can maybe help them with that. I can maybe support them in that. And then if you're talking to someone and what they're talking about is a little bit too complicated for you, or you think that there's a risk level involved, then consider talking to the crisis lines with them, or maybe saying, I think you need to book a doctor's appointment. And that's what I observed, that all of these things could be seen by a doctor and you might want to start there. So less of an advice and more of a push to suggest that, reminding yourself that that person's an adult. They get to make their own decisions. Those decisions under 18 are not the same. So if it's someone under 18, we know that we're youth, they're more impulsive naturally, their brains aren't developed enough. And the reality is that we might need to intervene a bit more with youth. But with adults, we all have personal decisions and personal choice. What you can be is that comfort, and what you can ask for is that comfort from folks. So I love language, and I love the power of language, which is probably why I like swear words. I love to swear. I think that the F word is one of my favorite words in the whole universe. But when I think of language, I also think about, and I want you to look at this language in two ways: how you talk to other people, but how you talk to yourself. So hurtful language, when someone is sharing about some mental health struggles, is things like, it's just in your head. Here in Calgary, I hear a lot, oh, you know what, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can get over it. And I think, wow, how negligent that is, and how truly unkind that is when you're talking about mental health. Lots of this language, again, advice, trying to pump people up when they've told you they're depressed is not helpful. It's not helpful. They're not ready to go there. They really want to talk about what's going on for them. So really minimizing that kind of language. What I find helpful is when someone is empathetic. And I always love the difference between sympathy and empathy, because sympathy is feeling for someone. I feel sorry for you. Empathy is feeling with someone. You know what? I hear your pain. I may not understand it exactly, but I hear what you're going through, and I'm here to support you. All of this language on here, and I never expect someone to ever use what I say verbatim, but they're keys to how you would word it, how you would say things. And I think the last one is the most important one. I'm here for you. We're all in this together. And that ties back to that grief and loss that we're all experiencing. We're all in this together. So I want to talk, wrapping it up, really talking about self-compassion and self-care, because they're not the same things. So for me, self-compassion comes through self-care. When I think about self-care, I very much think about actions and doing something on behavior. But self-compassion is that kind of being kind to yourself, and really accepting yourself and being in the moment when something is painful, and remembering to talk to ourselves internally and out loud, if you're like me, with kindness and care. We are not kind to ourselves as a general rule. And as our brains are designed to look for negatives, you know, that's why adrenaline kicks in fast, because stress response, we are not designed to be reflective. And these are things we have to learn. The good part is they're learnable. So always for me, it's how do I speak to myself? Because something I will criticize myself for, I might say to someone else in a way that, you know what, I've observed, and talk about a learning side of it, but I would never speak to another person that way as the way I speak to myself. If I was in a court and they could hear what my head said to me, I would probably be convicted of abuse, because I really do have some tough language that I have in my head. So really it is about, how do I do that kindness to myself? How do I speak in a way that's helpful to my brain? The self-compassion for me is that movement from an activity to a consideration in a certain way. It's really considering what you're feeling, considering what's going on in your brain, considering the language you're using with yourself. I remember when I worked at the distress center, and I loved working there. I worked there for 6 years. I ran some programs there, but I always took shifts on the crisis line, even though it wasn't necessary for me. I always did, because it helped me to practice all those listening skills that I mentioned earlier. But the other part of it is that we would talk to people about self-care and self-compassion, although we never always use those words, never always. We never use those words necessarily. We would often talk about self-care. And self-care is truly some of the actions. So Moira mentioned you have some gift bags, that people who are in Horizon Housing will get some gift bags. There's some things in there that are those kinds of things that we do that are helpful for ourselves. So I remember this on the crisis lines. I remember saying to people, you know what, to take a moment and have a cup of tea. And I had a whole bunch of people say, I don't drink tea. That doesn't work for me. And it doesn't work for everyone. But that stopping and drinking a warm liquid, that we slow down when we have a warm liquid versus a cold one. It's weird, but we do. And a warm liquid is easier absorbed in our body. A warmer or a hotter one, it's much easier. So the act of having a cup of tea is less about the tea and more about the moment, more about stopping and saying, okay, I'm going to put the kettle on, or I'm going to put the pot on, I'm going to boil the water. I'm going to stand here for 5-10 minutes and make that cup of tea. And then I'm going to sit down for 10 minutes on my own, or best you can. Sometimes mine's in the bathroom, sit in there by myself, and have that moment where I'm caring for myself and saying, I don't have to think of anything. I don't have to do anything. I can just be with myself and be calm. So I know that there's tea in your bags, but I want to give another couple of ideas of things that really help me. So I actually am very terrible at meditating. I'm pretty good at mindfulness. And meditation for me is very difficult because I have a hard time slowing my brain down enough to get to that state. Instead, I fall asleep, which is probably means I'm exhausted. As my doctor says, she said, if you fall asleep that fast, you're exhausted. But mindfulness is more about being in the moment and appreciating what's going on. So one of my favorite things to do, I don't have a fire in my house or anything like that, but I have lots of candles. And so oftentimes when I need that moment, I will actually light a candle, one with a lovely scent that I like. I predominantly do lavenders and vanillas, and I will put that on and I will just sit and I will focus on the light. I don't go into the light, but I focus on the light, so that for that period of time, it's just about me and that flame and pausing things. That really is critical for me. One of my other wellness things, and one of the other ways I do a bit of self-care, but also practice some self-compassion, is my walking. Most days I walk with my partner and my dog, but I at least 2 to 3 times a week go by myself with the dog. And then I put my headset in and I listen to audiobooks. I get free ones where I can. And I honestly will go for something motivating, but sometimes I just listen to ocean sounds like what's behind me. I listen to those kind of sounds and I calm myself down and I allow myself to be present. And then I say kind things to myself. You know what, Karen, you're doing a really good job. You know what, today's Monday and my goodness, I'm prepared for the week, which is not true. But Karen, on the weekend, you spent some time with the people that mattered the most to you. Karen, you know what, I'm so proud of you because you actually limited your social media this weekend. And I talked a bit about that, and I do want to finish with that one. Part of being self-care and self-compassion is stopping what comes into your brain and not taking information. All the stuff that happened in the US with the elections and with Trump and all that, whether you're a supporter or not, the media and how they handle things, and then the people that hijacked the media and put in their information that was untrue. Those are the folks that push our adrenaline up and make us very, very anxious. I have actually learned to limit my media. I only watch the news once a day, Monday to Friday, and I don't watch it on the weekends. I watch it every night, global at 6 o'clock, and then I'm done. And I will not watch it later because at 10 o'clock, if I watch the 10 o'clock news, my brain's going and I can't sleep. So I deliberately watch it earlier. I'm careful on the social media. I love social media. I'm on every platform. You'll find me as Canadian KGB everywhere, good initials. And I love social media and I do it for my work. But when it comes about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, I put it away. And I have to actually put my phone in another room. Otherwise, I will pick it up automatically, which is a terrible trait. So those are the kind of things that I'm practicing for self-care. And when I do the self-care, I find I have time for the self-compassion. I love the analogy of when you go on an airplane, the flight attendant always says, if the oxygen mask should drop from above you, put the oxygen mask on your face first before you help someone with you that needs it. And I think that's where we're all at right now. Right now, we need to put the mask on ourselves, literally and figuratively, and we need to do some self-care and self-compassion before we can move into anything about supporting others. So if you can't support others, don't beat yourself up over it. Don't do that, because reality is it's okay to take care of you, because that will keep your capacity up and you won't get depleted. And that's always my big worry. Burnout's a whole different thing, but depletion is when we just run out of the ability to do things and we struggle. And that's the tough part for me. So I always like to throw up some of the places out there for help. Our peer support is open Monday to Friday. We got limited hours right now. Distress Center we know is 24/7. And Recovery College I mentioned for courses. So if you go on recoverycollege.ca, we have a number of virtual courses being delivered. We have fun ones like Adulting 101, which is one of my favorites. I should have took that. And then we have other ones about building better boundaries, or self-care for the caregiver, about someone who's caring for someone. And they're all free. And we've put a lot of them in bite-sized pieces, so they're down to 1 hour, so that you can really just focus on that for an hour. And I invite everyone to take part in those and really see what it's like to have some of that knowledge that you can use in your language to yourself. I do put up all CMHA social media channels. And I will say this is less about having a number of followers and likes and engagement, and more about when you share something from a mental health organization, you're saying, I'm safe to talk to. And the best example I have for that is when Meghan Markle and Harry moved off. Meghan had talked about her being suicidal after she had her baby. And a bunch of people on social media really pulled her to pieces, and they said all kinds of things about mental health not being real and things like that. And someone did a tweet that is stuck in my head. And they said, Meghan Markle's never going to read your tweet, but someone in your circle is going to, and they're going to know that you're not someone that's safe to go to and talk about your mental health. And so I share these in hopes that if you see something important, you share it publicly so that other people know you're safe and they know that there's resources out there. So I'm going to leave it there for questions and end my slideshow, because I'm terrible at this. And I know that there are a bunch of comments in here. I'm terrible because I don't read them while I'm presenting, but love to sort of open it up for questions, ideas. I'm seeing lots of good comments. I love that you put there where the CMHA has counseling folks. Absolutely. We specialize in grief and loss, and we specialize in counseling for folks that have lost someone to suicide particularly. But I would say that grief and loss is a little bit bigger this year. Oh, I like your rewarding. Thank you very much. So I don't see more questions here. What I do see is a lot of comments, which I love. Wish I could capture them all. Someone made a comment about for employers, less sick days, more employee engagement, better productivity. Yeah, duh, you're absolutely right. Taking care of ourselves is the key. Putting it, carrying that in that sense for yourself. And I'm not sure if there's more. I know, Moira, I'm going to turn it over to you because you're probably looking at the questions. I'm mostly seeing comments.
Yeah, I really love all the comments that you put in the chat. So thank you everyone for doing that. Someone did actually send in a question. So how do you cope with loneliness at a time when we can't see people? Do you have any tips for that, Karen?
And it's interesting because I think loneliness, it doesn't matter if you live with people or not, you can be lonely. Isolation's different, but right now we're experiencing both. And I have found the big thing that helps me has been finding little things that I can do for myself, a little bit of self-compassion, but things that sometimes involve talking. So I'm one to put on songs on the radio and sing along and dance because I need to hear sometimes my own voice, which sounds strange. As I said, I talk so much, but if you live alone, you don't hear people speaking unless that's for on TV. So things like that, where you hear your own voice. I look for comedy things that I can get lost in and laugh with. I don't watch drama things because that doesn't help my mental health. But things like connecting with folks. If you have Netflix, watching Netflix with someone else who's in another place. And you can do that. You can watch the same movie and have the chat open. So finding little ways to connect with people that matter. The other part for me, when I'm definitely in spaces, and I do get lonely at times, even though I live with 3 adult males. That sounds terrible, but 2 of them are children, or my kids. And for me, it's really that, how do I keep my brain safe? CMHA at Recovery College we actually have, instead of having all courses, we do have some social hangouts on Zoom. So that's a place to go where you can talk to other people in a room like this and have an opportunity to connect. the last one I'd say is for loneliness is, for me, it's trying to connect with others that maybe I haven't before. And I'm all about compassion and empathy for other people. And that when I do things for other people, I'm very selfish. It makes me feel good. So one of the things I've started doing during the pandemic is every Sunday, I write 2 or 3 letters, depending on my capacity, or 2 or 3 cards. I create them. I use my creative juices and I send them to seniors in isolation. Because it's a way of saying that somebody cares about you. And when I care for someone, I find that I feel better. That really feeds my it's my jam. It feeds my soul.
Wonderful. I think those are all great ideas. And I will say thank you everyone for putting your comments in the chat. And thank you so much, Karen, for being part of our Wellness Week and kicking things off. This has been great. And I do want to say, if anybody is interested in continuing with their wellness journey, you should have received this wellness guide in your wellness kit if you're a Horizon resident. There's actually a whole section on ways that you can practice self-care. There's some community resources in there. And this is also available to download on our website. So go ahead and take a look. We also have a session from CMHA's Recovery College tomorrow at noon. So if you're interested in learning about some of the things that you can help on your wellness journey through those courses and elements, you can tune in then. And I will also just remind everybody that there will be a survey that should pop up, but I'm putting the link in the chat just in case it doesn't. Make sure you give us some feedback. We really appreciate it. Wellness Week this is the first time we're doing an initiative like this, so we really value your feedback. And as a reminder, that's where Horizon residents can go to be entered to win the Stress Less case full of those goodies. So make sure you go on there and fill it out. And once again, thank you so much, Karen. Thank you everyone for attending. We've got one more session today. You can tune in at 1 o'clock with Cam Stones, who's actually on Team Canada's bobsleigh team and is an RBC Olympian. And he's going to be talking about pushing through challenges. So enjoy your lunch, everybody. Thank you, Karen, so much.
Anytime.
And we'll see you all soon.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.